Hello everyone and welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're all good and well. So we go back to the horror part of the channel now as I count down my top 10 horror films of the year, my top 10 horror films of 2023. It's been an interesting year for horror, I think. We've had some highs and lows, no doubt. I have to say everything I've seen at the cinema, or certainly most films I've been to see at the cinema, have been pretty great. And I've had a really great experience when I've actually gone out to see a film almost pretty soon after its release. Some of the films I've seen on streaming haven't been quite so good, but there have been a few exceptions to that. I have streamed some really good horror films as well. So let's get cracking. No reason for me to hang around on my list. I've got my 10 films ready here, and we're going to obviously start here at number 10, which is Little Bone Lodge, directed by Matthias Hohner. Stars Jolie Richardson as the mum in this. And this is a sort of crime thriller film. It's as well as being horror, or certainly having very strong horror elements. I think it's got enough horror for me to put it into the horror category or horror genre. So you've got two criminal brothers here that are on the run, and they take refuge in a family farmhouse. And the film basically kind of makes you ask, well, who holds the darkest secrets here? Who's the sort of true villain of the piece? And you're asking that throughout the film. It very cleverly sort of disguises, I think, some of the true motivations of its different characters. And it keeps you guessing until the end. I love the set piece at the end of the film as well. It's just a really good film, actually, and it makes it here into my number 10, sneaks into my top 10 horror films of 2023. Moving on to number 9 now, we go to The Boogyman. This stars Sophie Thatcher here as Sadie Harper, and actually that's something I want to say straight off the bat. I thought she was terrific in this film, and one of the reasons I thought the film was very good. It got mixed reception, The Boogyman, actually, when this came out. This was directed by Rob Savage, of course, and it kind of got a mixed reception, really. But I actually may be in the minority in really enjoying this one. I just thought it got a lot of the basics of doing a horror film and doing it well right. And that was in its direction. I enjoyed the suspense build-ups, the jump scares, the characterisation, and as I say, stellar performance from Sophie Thatcher as well. Made sure that this has entered my top 10 horror films of the year. Great climax of the film, really exciting climax. I thought maybe a little bit predictable, but very exciting all the same. That's my number 9, The Boogeyman. At number 8, we have a film I think lots of you enjoy. I think it was one of my more popular films when I did a poll of which horror films have you enjoyed most throughout the year. And Megan was one of the top voted, if not the top voted film. So Megan is next on my list. This was directed by Gerard Johnston. It's a sort of sci-fi spin on the Chucky franchise. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was great fun, if nothing else. Certainly a very, very fun film, very entertaining. I think it was smart the way they did the Megan doll, and they made her funny and comical. Yeah, I was impressed by the performance of child actor Violet McGraw as Katie in this film. And yeah, I think it deserves a spot at number 8. Very kind of just super entertaining film. And it'd be interesting to see where they take this for the next film in the Megan franchise. So coming in now at number 7 is a film that I streamed. I think this came out on Shudder. This was Influencer. And this is a really interesting social media horror film that had me pretty gripped throughout. And I think it was largely due to its cast of characters and the interesting interplay between them and the motivations. Although the motivations were very, very well disguised, perhaps almost too disguised at times in this movie. I really like this. It stars Rory J. Saper, Emily Tennant, Cassandra Nord. I thought Rory J. Saper and Cassandra Nord were fantastic, particularly Cassandra Nord, who maintained the enigma of her character throughout the film, and made for a thoroughly sort of engaging character, actually, that she was portraying as this CW who, obviously you sort of discover as the film goes on, has more and more that is sinister about her. But yeah, really, really good film. You kept asking, what's going to happen next, I think. What is CW going to do next in this story? And yeah, I had a good time with Influencer. Really good film, very stylishly filmed. Really enjoyed the way it was filmed as well at times, keeping up this intensity and suspense incredibly well. So Influencer is my number 7. Coming up now at number 6, we've got Scream 6. Obviously, there's been a huge amount of turbulence within the Scream franchise recently, with Melissa Pereira getting fired and Jenna Ortega departing. Not going to go really much into that here. For me, I think it was, very harsh on Melissa Pereira to have been fired from the franchise. But anyway, I'm going to talk about Scream 6 here specifically. I thought this was a really good film. and I thoroughly enjoyed its action sequences and set pieces throughout. That was the thing for me that made this Scream film slightly better than its predecessor. Was I thought all the action sequences were fantastic, smart, and just very well executed and filmed. And yes, I thought Melissa Barrera was excellent in this movie, as was Jenna Ortega again. And the twist, the one thing about Scream 6 I will say is I thought the twist was a little bit predictable for me at the end. I could see that coming personally. I don't know about anybody else, but still a really, really entertaining and gripping Scream film, pretty much from the start right through to the finish. And and it actually made it to number 2 in my Scream films ranking as well. So anyway, that's enough from Scream. We move on now to my number 5 on my list, which is Totally Killer, directed by Nainacha Khan. Totally Killer, for me, one of the big surprises of the year. I didn't really know what I was going to get when I saw this film. It is a sort of black comedy slasher with a sci-fi spin. Think Scream having a child with Back to the Future, and you get Totally Killer, pretty much. What I loved about this film was the way it dealt with sort of intergenerational differences and managed to pull that off in a comical way. And I really loved the performance of Kiernan Shipka as Jamie, which was great. I really hope we get to see Kiernan Shipka in more of this kind of film, more in horror maybe. I think she's really, like, something about comedy horror I thought really suited her performance in this movie and her character and just everything. And I really liked, though, the way the film took time. I mean, it had very ambitious scope going for a sci-fi spin on a sort of slasher comedy, on all that formula. But despite that, it carved out real depth to its characters. And I thought that's really what made Totally Killer a successful film for me, was that despite having a really kind of ambitious story behind it for me, with lots of different elements, was what tied it together were the characters, and it took time to develop the story a bit at the beginning of the film. So by the end, you sort of had a better understanding of what was going on, and it was just thoroughly entertaining stuff for Totally Killer. Yep, great surprise for this year for me. Coming in at number 4, we have Possession Horror. We have a film which actually, when I saw the trailer, I didn't think it looks that great. But when I saw the film, I was really in for a big surprise at how good this was. And it got a lot of hype. And that's Talk to Me, directed by Michael and David Philippou, the brothers. It stars Sophie Wilde, who puts in a phenomenal performance as the lead Mia in this film. Really pretty stunning stuff, actually. This in theory, you know, if I was more a possession horror fan, I do like possession horror, but I'm not as big on it as I am other horror genres or subgenres. It would probably be my number 1 film, right, if that was the case, if I really loved possession horror, because it's a fantastic movie, it's fantastic. For me, many will call this the horror film of the year. It's my number 4 just because there are 3 films that I just personally just enjoyed a tiny bit, probably because of my personal film preferences within horror. But yeah, this is a fantastic film. Does possession horror well with a unique modern spin on possession horror, with people filming the possessions, grabbing this sort of hand and having a spirit transparency with rules surrounding you know, how that happens and why it happens, and it's all very interesting and just directed brilliantly and done really, really well. It's easy to see why Talk to Me is one of the most talked about films in 2023. That's my number 4. We move on now to number 3, Saw X, directed by Kevin Greuter. Don't need to talk much about Saw X. I've talked about it quite a lot already. It was in my tier list. I did a Saw ranking. But yeah, this is Saw done right for me. And it was interesting, I think Cody Leach loved this one as well, and it made his number 1 in his Saw ranking, right? And it came number 2 in mine. I thought this was genuinely a huge surprise. Certainly in Saw terms, we've had a lot of pretty bad sequels, in my opinion. And this one got a lot right in the Saw formula, but it also added something, I think, in character depth, particularly with Tobin Bell being the sort of lead in this film, which was nice to see. He deserves the screen time as Jigsaw. Fantastic stuff. Love the interactions between all the characters in this, and I thought before we got the traps, the story development and a little bit of character development, not a huge amount, did give the film enough depth to make the traps really, really superb. The traps for me, particularly those earlier traps, at least the one with Valentina in, was so gripping. It's one of the most that is one of the best sort of traps, and probably one of the goriest, but one of the best traps I've seen in the Saw franchise actually for a while, in terms of suspense and, you know, having you sort of wince as you're watching it. Great scene and great performance actually from the actress that played Valentina. I can't think of her name just off the top of my head right now, but amazing stuff. Saw X surprisingly comes in at number 3 on an end of year horror films of the year list. Who'd thought a Saw sequel this far in would do so well, but it did. Number 2 on my list is Evil Dead Rise, another film I've talked a bit about recently. I did an Evil Dead ranking recently. For me, the thing that made Evil Dead Rise successful, this was directed by Lee Cronin, was its setting and its sister element, the two sisters for me. I really enjoyed we got something fresh by not having an Evil Dead film in a cabin in the woods, having it in a city, in a sort of, you know, that metropolitan environment. And I loved Alyssa Sutherland's performance, both as, you know, a human and then as the Deadite. And then also, I thought Lily Sullivan was great as Beth Bixler. And those two interactions between those two were, for me, what really made this a fantastic Evil Dead film. That added the depth that I thought, you know, some Evil Dead films for me, they don't always have much character depth, but this film did. And I liked that, and that for me gave the film a great climax at the end as well. It's really gory, this one, really brutal, very graphic, so it may not be for everyone, but then I could say that about just about every film on this list, or most of them. Yeah, Evil Dead Rise, another sort of surprise, you know. I went in with sort of not really knowing, I mean, knowing Evil Dead doesn't have any bad films helped a bit perhaps, but yeah, this was a really strong Evil Dead film, and it makes it right up high at number 2. I was thoroughly entertained. But it's not quite beaten my number 1, and neither have any of the other films on this list so far, obviously. My number 1 is the film that when I went to see it, I have never come out of a film in a long time being completely blown away by a movie. Just purely, I mean, the film isn't perfect. I don't think it's a perfect film. But it was a film with both style and substance, and it had me gripped from start to finish. And it was because of my experience with this film, going to see it shortly after its release, and being like, you know, start to end, not taking my eyes off the screen, wondering what was going on sometimes, but loving every second of its pure chaos and its dystopian way and everything about it. That's Infinity Pool, which is my number 1 horror film of the year. Like I say, not a perfect film. I didn't even put it in S tier on one of my tier lists earlier in the year. But the film is so enthralling. It's such, as I say, it's an experience of a movie. Seeing this just blew me away. And it's what I want to see when I see a horror film, is something which grips me start to end, something which I'm going to be thoroughly entertained by, something I'm going to be shocked by, something which is going to make me remember it when it comes to the end of the year. That's what Infinity Pool did. That's what Alexander Skarsgård and Mia Goth did in this film. Their sort of chemistry was really helpful in pulling forward this, you know, bizarre kind of ideas behind this film that Brandon Cronenberg was executing, but its direction, everything was spot on for me on this film. Lots to really enjoy. It's enthralling, it's gripping, it smartly raises questions about morality, the seduction of power and privilege, how all of this could affect somebody, and we see the way it affects James throughout the film. He is, you know, great to see Mia Goth as well. Always her performances as someone who is disturbed and unhinged are always really captivating. Infinity Pool is my number 1 horror film of 2023. Therefore, I hope you enjoyed watching my tier list throughout the year. I'm sorry you didn't get tier list part 8. That's because whenever I do Zoom calls at my laptop, that's when my hard drive seems to have my laptop makes its biggest noises. So I decided to refrain from doing the last tier list, but I'm hoping to do that early on in the new year, so you still get my part 8 tier list and you don't miss out. Otherwise, from me, thanks as always for watching, supporting the channel. Don't forget to drop a like and a sub. Until next time, bye for now.